Hi guys, welcome back to our third week of our virtual summer in the garden. I'm Miss Nicole here in the courtyard, and this is Miss Kelsey.
Hey guys, so this week we're going to be talking about different reptiles that we find throughout the Florida Keys and specifically throughout the garden here. And today we're going to be comparing reptiles and amphibians. So make sure to follow along with your worksheet, and then you can complete the activities at the end and post them using the hashtag KWVirtualGarden for a chance to be entered into our raffle and win a prize at the end of the week.
Hey guys, I'm here at our freshwater pond at the Botanical Garden to talk about reptiles. Reptiles are ectothermic, which means that they need to get their heat source from somewhere else because they're cold-blooded. That's why we see reptiles often sunbathing. Reptiles are also hard, scaly, usually more dry type of covering, and sometimes they shed their skin. And this is also helping them to live in their environments, which is typically on land and a little bit in the water. Some examples of reptiles are crocodiles, alligators, lizards, turtles, iguanas, and even dinosaurs. And all of those animals, like you might know, lay their eggs on land, which makes reptiles unique to lay their eggs on the land. Like you might have seen sea turtles before that come out of the sea to go lay their eggs. These eggs are usually covered in a hard casing. There are some reptiles though that give a live birth. Unlike amphibians, reptiles give birth to a miniature version of them, so they start as a baby and get bigger. Whereas amphibians, they typically go through different stages in a life cycle. Here at the garden, we currently have two examples of reptiles in this freshwater pond. The first one I'm going to talk about is the red-eared sliders. So we have a whole bunch of them right here. And you can tell which ones are the red-eared sliders because it looks like they have red ears. The females are actually bigger than the males. So the bigger ones are the females, the males are a bit smaller. And the males, in order to attract a female for mating season, they do a fun thing like jazz hands. They go to get the female's attention. Red-eared sliders are also not native to the Florida Keys. And when you think about that, that makes sense because here in the Florida Keys, we have a lot of saltwater, but we don't have too many fresh bodies of water. So these red-eared sliders were actually introduced here, and that's why they're here at the garden in our freshwater. The other turtle I'd like to talk about is a mud turtle. Now, mud turtles have an oval-shaped shell and stripes on it because they're called the striped mud turtle. Those turtles are actually native to the Florida Keys, but they are endangered. And they're endangered because they also need fresh water. They can have a salinity level of 15 parts per thousand or less. And here, again, at Florida Keys, we have salt water. So there aren't many places that mud turtles can survive and thrive in. One spot they can is here at our freshwater pond. So those are just some examples of the reptiles we have here.
Hey guys, so we're here at the North Side Pond once again, and we're going to talk a little bit about amphibians. So amphibians and reptiles, they're pretty similar creatures, but they have a few key differences that we're going to note. So what makes them similar? So both of these guys are ectothermic. So that means that they're not able to regulate their own body temperature internally like you and I can. They're cold-blooded, so they need to gather their heat source from outside sources, so like from the sun. That's why you'll see these guys sunbathing quite often. They also will shed their skin, just like reptiles. And then these guys have an interesting organ that's located on the top of the roof of their mouth or in their nasal passage called the Jacobson's organ. So this is what helps them kind of pick up scent trails, or they can actually taste from the air. So for example, if you see a snake or a lizard kind of sticking his tongue out, he's actually using that to smell or taste a scent in the air, pick up a trace, and follow maybe a prey item or something like that. So amphibians share that trait as well. Some things that make amphibians different than reptiles are their life stages. So the word amphibian actually comes from the Greek word meaning double life. So it's pretty interesting. These guys usually lay their eggs in water, which is different than the reptiles. Then the larva will hatch, and they spend their larval stage in the water. So these guys have gills, and they don't have any limbs, so similar to a fish. Once they start their metamorphosis, which is the process of them moving from their larval stage into their adult stage, they'll start to do things like grow limbs and develop lungs. So then they move from the water onto a more dry land environment. And then adults will still spend most of their lives in humid conditions or near and into the water. So they kind of spend a lot more of their lives in the water than maybe reptiles do. These guys also have a semi-permeable skin. So unlike these reptiles that have these like hard plates, these guys have a softer semi-permeable skin. It allows them to exchange water and gas through their skin in the water and in their humid environments. These guys also use a defense tactic where they essentially secrete toxic chemicals from their skin in order to deter predators. So for example, certain types of frogs, you've probably heard of maybe the poisonous dart frog. They'll secrete a toxic chemical that will actually harm and potentially kill predators that would otherwise want to eat these frogs. So an example of an amphibian that we have here in the garden are these tadpoles here. So if you look closely, we have a couple little tadpoles swimming around. And these guys are in their larval stage, so they have gills, they do not have any legs, and they spend their entire time as tadpoles in the water. Now these guys will slowly start to grow. It takes about 12 weeks for a tadpole to turn all the way into its adult frog stage. They'll start by growing their back legs. So their hind limbs will kind of start to grow. They still have that long tail. And at that stage, they're called froglets. Now, eventually, as we keep moving on, they start to then grow their front limbs. They start to develop those lungs so that they can breathe in air. And their tail will shrink into their body until eventually they're a full, mature frog. And yeah, thanks for checking in. I hope you guys learned something cool about amphibians today.